Listen, everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time and your energy and your attention. And yeah, we're going to talk about growing in your content career. And we'll talk about things like influence and ambiguity. And we're going to also wrap this up in a really lovely discussion, I think, around how to do all of that without sacrificing your values or losing your soul. So if everyone is ready to go, we're going to jump into it. Before I go right into the content, I just wanted to give you a little bit of more context about me. I'm Shannon. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And in case your internet connection gets a little choppy, or if you're listening with audio only, I am a half white, half Chinese woman. I have very dark brown hair that's in a really short bob. And I am wearing a gray and black leopard print top, very on brand tonight for myself. I also have some bright red lipstick, and you might see me wave my hands around a little bit. I get really, really excited. And the fact that you all are here with me to hang out tonight and talk about a topic that's really dear to my heart, you'll probably get a little bit of hand waving from me as well. And I do really love leopard print and gifts, which you will also see, spoiler alert, in this presentation. I'm a dual citizen of the US and Australia. I'm partner to Matt, who is also the very nice human who made these very, very awesome slides for me. Jaden and Ryland are my kids who are currently doing their bedtime routine. And Ginger Snap and Sunday Snow are my fur babies. Ginger Snap is wearing a delightful unicorn headband, and Sunday is the brown and white pit bull mix that you see here on screen as well. And like Paula mentioned, I do love meetups myself as well. And I run one here in Richmond called RVA Content Strategy. And we are 11 years young, still going strong. These are photos from the before times when we were doing in-person events, mostly doing stuff virtual now, like Content Strategy Seattle. And to give you just a little bit more of how I came to be a senior UX manager, my career started out in web copywriting, actually. So web copywriting, search engine optimization, and when social media was first getting picked up by small and local businesses as a way to connect with people. That was my life for the beginning part of my career. Eventually, I did a career pivot into instructional design or creating training materials for different companies. And eventually, I took all those lessons that I was learning and really kind of that attitude and kind of perspective around. I really loved helping to solve problems for people and do it through the lens of communication, through content, through words and writing. Eventually, I translated that experience into content design, and I got my first official UX job as a content designer at Capital One. In my time at Capital One, I transitioned through becoming more senior as an individual contributor, so being a part of a team. Eventually, I became a UX manager and then senior UX manager, and I had the privilege of leading both a cross-disciplinary design team and also a content design practice. And my current role today, I am now at Adobe, where I am a senior content design manager. And the reason why this talk about growing your career really, really resonated with me, it was almost like I was giving a pep talk to past me, because I realized in my own story, and as I started working with others through managing people and also through mentoring, I really had to re-examine and redefine my relationship to concepts like growth, leadership, and leveling up. Because what I found in my experience was all too often very, very well-meaning, well-intentioned people, when I would ask them, well, what does that mean? Well, how do I, what's the next step? How do I level up, right? They would answer my questions where I was throwing in some buzzwords. Well, they would answer me just straight back in buzzwords too. They'd talk about grow your influence. You have to navigate this increasing ambiguity. And a lot of times, I don't know about you, but I started feeling a little bit like this.
Oh, next step is to fold in the cheese.
What does that mean? What does fold in the cheese mean?
He folds it in.
I understand that, but how do you fold it? Do you fold it in half like a piece of paper and drop it in the pot, or what do you do?
David, I cannot show you everything.
Okay, well, can you show me one thing?
Here's what you do. You just fold it in.
Okay, I don't know how to fold broken cheese like that.
And I don't know how to be any clearer. You take that thing that's in your hand, and you...
If you say fold in one more time...
It says fold it in!
Okay, there we go. You have to be in the right tab around in the right window to get your slides to advance. I did sneak a peek at the chat real quick, and yes, what a perfect metaphor, right? Who knew that Schitt's Creek, in addition to talking about cooking dinner for your family, that they would also have such eloquent things to tell us about growing in your career. But what I love about that segment from Schitt's Creek, David Rose and Moira Rose, they're trying to make dinner for their family, and they get to a point in the recipe where you have to fold in the cheese. And David is like, WTF, what the heck does that even mean? And Moira just keeps saying it back to him like, well, if I say it more, you're going to understand me, right? And talking about growth and development, it can feel really similar, right? Like you see and hear and just really feel David's mounting frustration. And I think a lot of that overlaps too with how we start to potentially feel when we're talking about where we want our story to go next. Because again, it's like, okay, well, what does that really mean? What does that mean in practice? And I've had questions in my own career around, well, can I do those things that you're telling me to do if I don't have a fancy title or if I don't work at a big company? Sometimes you're left feeling, I've seen what leadership looks like in the design field or in tech. And I don't agree with that picture of success. There's a conflict with my values. There's a conflict with what I believe in. I don't see or hear or learn about people who look like me, talk like me, sound like me, have life experiences or work experiences like me. Or sometimes you have those questions around, gosh, do I have the right personality? I'm not extroverted enough. I'm not big enough. I don't take up enough room in the proverbial room, as it were, right? And so really what I want to do with tonight is I want to dispel all of that. And I really want to talk about what influence, ambiguity, and autonomy, what they look like in real life, in my experience. And so this is my very humble decoder ring. This is what I've kind of come to realize over the last 15 years working in content and working in design. And these three skills in particular, other than being very, very buzzwordy, right? These are also skills that whether I worked at a 4-person company or a 20,000 person company, whether I was an individual contributor or a manager, when I was a web copywriter, all the way up through working in UX and being a UX manager, these are skills that transcended those roles and those phases of my career. And they have common ground, no matter kind of what shape your career might be taking, what it might look like right now. So we're going to jump into influence first. And the way that I like to think about this and break this down is kind of like 3 flavors or 3 dimensions. The first being execution and planning. The second being impact and network. And finally, teaching and change. And we'll start with execution and planning first. So real talk, okay, what does this actually mean in real life? And the way that I have approached this is, as I build my influence, that means that I'm moving from executing a solution, so doing the thing, just doing the thing, to starting to define and drive the work to be done. And so what that might look like when I started as a web copywriter, this scenario might be very familiar to you in different content practitioner roles. Used to write and add content at the end of a project. So the designers would go design and make mock-ups, and then we'd add the content at the end, and then we'd send it to the client for review. And over time in our working relationship, things started to evolve, and I started to come into the process earlier. And I started to wireframe, sketch, co-create our designs with the other web designers that I was working with. And so I moved from this place of, oh, yep, no, I'm like doing this one part, to really starting to influence the direction and the shape that our work was taking by coming into the process earlier. It also can look like moving from being a member of a team, so you're participating in a project, then you might lean into leading a project. And ultimately, this might become leading multiple projects in an area. And you might do this as a content lead. In my case, I started as a content lead, but eventually moved into being a design lead. Sometimes you might hear people refer to this as doing the work through other people. So sometimes with this work, as far as, you know, starting to step up and lead a project or lead multiple projects, it's really about starting to influence through things like feedback and mentoring and coaching and critiques. You're starting to influence the approaches that other people take and the decisions that they're making and how they're, you know, solving different problems or opportunities. There we go. Influence might also start to look like where you're being assigned the project. So a lot of us, you know, you might have a project manager or a design manager or someone else that you're working with where they're helping to kind of look at and assign, okay, so-and-so is working on this, so-and-so is working on this. And another place where you might start to expand your influence is moving from not only working on projects, but you're going to start potentially deciding what is the work to be done and who will be working on it. And so this might manifest, if you're in more of a UX oriented team, this might look like starting to scope your project portfolios and starting to help influence, hey, this is the order, this is the sequence in which we're going to develop something. This might, to kind of like adapt this a little bit differently, if you're in a little bit more of like an agency or consultancy setup, you might start to influence through pitching new client work and winning new client work. All right, so let's jump next to impact and network. And really what I see this as is it's moving from having an impact on kind of your immediate, like day-to-day projects and teammates. And over time, you start to have an impact on this kind of burgeoning, growing network of projects, people, teams, or processes. So again, drawing from real life, web copywriter days, I was writing website content. And then eventually, as I learned more about both the craft of writing, but I also started learning about the business side of writing and designing. And then I started having very strong feelings and strong opinions about how do we price that and get paid what we're worth. Eventually, that all translated into influencing how we were structuring our pricing for our different services. And it also meant changing some of the ways that we were doing client pitches and how we were writing proposals. So again, kind of started in my day-to-day sphere of I am here to provide a service. I'm writing website content for our clients, but that eventually I moved into influencing a process at the company that I worked at. Another way that I've built influence is taking my content and design superpowers and using them for special projects or other context. So again, doing my day-to-day work. In this case, this was when I was a UX content designer at Capital One. I was working on my assigned project area. And then through the course of some team surveys and all hands, I learned about an opportunity to be on a special kind of project squad that was focused on mentorship and peer support. And ultimately, one of the things that I did as part of that special kind of task force was creating this really cool evergreen mentorship playbook. So everything from interviewing our teammates and understanding their pain points and what information they were looking for, all the way through to organizing, structuring, and writing and editing the content in that playbook. Looked a lot like my design process. I just turned those superpowers inward and used them for the greater good of my team. Influence can also start to look like sharing your tools and your work with others so that they can then use and remix your approach or your frameworks in the things that they're doing. This is I'm going to share my contact information at the end. So if you want to follow up more about this project in particular, creating a comms mapping framework, that's just a code, fancy speak for a spreadsheet. I made a big ass spreadsheet, as content folks want to do. And what was really cool about that was it was mapping some relationships and kind of how we needed to shift our messaging with a customer base over time. And I'm talking like, this was like a 6, 9, 12 month, like about a year. And we also layered in some other things that we wanted to take into account, such as some tech constraints, where we were pulling data from, things like that. And what was really, really cool is I had the opportunity to share that work with another team, and a VP of product management gave me the best compliment I could ever ask for as a content practitioner. They said, I want to steal your spreadsheet, like verbatim. That is what they said. I took a screenshot, put it in my annual review that year. And it was just a really great, it was really, really well received, but it was also this example of where influence is a team sport. A lot of times it can feel like I've just got to navigate things by myself and just people just know how to do it. I didn't know that this team could benefit from using a framework like this. Our design senior director at the time, they were plugged into this other work stream, and they had been part of a presentation to see that framework, to see that spreadsheet. They're the one who said, oh, I'm going to introduce you to this team over here because I think that their project could really benefit from this kind of thinking and this kind of approach. So that was a really, really helpful, kind of connection that they made that ultimately also helped me further my influence. Okay, so we've talked about execution and planning, we've talked about our network, and now finally, I think this is my favorite part of growing influence, teaching and change. And so as you're kind of thinking about your skill set and your craft, and just all the amazing things that you're doing with content, what you start to notice again is this shift, kind of shifting along this spectrum of going from you're practicing and doing your craft yourself to starting to teach those skills and approaches to others, and then ultimately starting to drive change. And that where you're driving that change, it could be inside your company. It could be driving change in your local community. It might be even bigger scale than that. But again, it all kind of just depends on where, kind of where your energy and attention is going, but want to kind of make space for it and acknowledge that it can happen at all these kinds of different levels. So getting a little bit meta, right? I'm not talking about content testing tonight, but if you're doing something like doing content testing, or maybe you've cracked the code on how to work with developers, right? You can present that information at a local meetup, such as Content Strategy Seattle. And you can do it, it might be in a long talk, but you can also kind of dip your toe in and get a feel for things by doing shorter talks. So for example, one of the first public speaking engagements I did was actually a lightning talk, and it was about content testing. And I think it was about 10 to 12 minutes max. So it was a nice way to kind of get a feel for and see if I liked doing that. And it was also at a local meetup here in Richmond. So it was a small audience. I knew a lot of those folks, a lot of friendly faces. So it was a really cozy and safe and inviting place to start to experiment with teaching. Another dimension of this, I talked about, you might do external presentations, but you might also do internal presentations. And so I also had the opportunity at one of my old jobs to kind of go on a little internal tour and do some training for other departments. And so I actually did some content testing presentations based off of my lightning talk. I adapted that for an internal audience in another department. You might also explore mentorship as a path, and this might look like mentoring other content designers first, and they might be your peers, they might be more junior to you, they might even be more senior to you, because there might be some aspect of content. Maybe you are really, really well versed in A/B testing, or maybe you are right here at the forefront of things like AI and prompt engineering, and there are other folks who are looking to you to learn from your expertise. I wouldn't let like levels, job titles, and all of that get in your head too much, because you've got a voice, you've got a perspective, you've got something valuable to share, even if there's somebody who's more senior than you are. Mentorship can also start to evolve into, as a content designer, you might start to mentor designers from other disciplines. So you might do mentoring with researchers or design strategists or product designers. You might even start to mentor people from other job families. So this could look like working with tech, engineering, marketing, business analysts, data analysts. Again, it's that focus on that skill sharing and skill building for the folks who are around you. And sometimes your influence might come literally through the form of teaching. In my case, I had the chance, I knew somebody who was doing a UX boot camp. She was an instructor through General Assembly, and she invited me when they got to the content design part of their curriculum. She invited me to join their class for a day and talk about that. Jane Ruffino, Nicole Michaelis, Scott Kuby, they have done workshops and multi-day courses, or even like semester-long courses at different colleges and universities. A lot of other folks dip into that as well. And again, depending on the interest areas you have and where you're comfortable, kind of, how public or how big of an audience you want, I would again kind of emphasize things like local meetups. It might mean channeling your thoughts and your expertise into something like a newsletter. Michelle Keller is a content designer. She focuses on bereavement care, and she's based here in Virginia. She's in Charlottesville. So she's working at a small company. She's in a relatively small, relatively unheard of company, except shout out to all the Virginians who are on this call. I'm like, oh yeah, Charlottesville. But again, like she realized that she had a voice and she wanted to be able to share and contribute back with her community. And so she recently started a newsletter through Substack. I also know some folks from my time at Capital One. They're a little bit earlier in their career. They started a cool podcast called Design Bubble. And also, if you're familiar with Content Design with Friends, I think that's a new podcast that had launched, I think it was earlier this year. But again, like there's a lot of different shapes, flavors, forms that influence can show up in, and there's a lot of opportunity to kind of tailor it to what feels most authentic and true to you. All right, so let's keep moving. We're going to go tackle the beast that is ambiguity next. And all right, so navigating ambiguity, we see it in job descriptions, we hear it in performance reviews. What does it actually mean? The way that I've made this a little bit more concrete and real for me is thinking about this as moving from working within a pretty small and pretty well-defined scope to bigger scope, bigger kind of project areas and it has less and less definition. And really, as you're navigating ambiguity, it's about taking those steps that create clarity for yourself, as well as create clarity for others. So here's some examples of what I mean by that. As a UX content designer at Capital One, I had the opportunity early in my career there to redesign an existing payment reminder email. So small scope, one email, and it already existed. So we had a lot of context and information about how people were interacting with that email, what actions they were taking or not taking off of it. And we had a pretty grounded understanding of people's payment behaviors and their mindsets, their assumptions, and things like that. At the beginning of 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic started here in the United States, I had the opportunity to be part of the team that worked on the COVID response measures for Capital One's credit card customers. And so this was a much bigger scope. There was a brand new end-to-end flow that was being created for people to be able to sign up for a payment plan. These payment plans also brand new terms, brand new policies. All of these new things were coming online in wake of the pandemic. In addition to the flow, our digital flow, there were servicing communications, so enrollment confirmations, payment reminders, plan completion emails. We also had a turn in helping to work on the scripting for our IVR, so our phone-based interactions, as well as some touch points within our agent channel. So talk about a lot of scope. And a pandemic for a lot of the folks that were on this team, it wasn't something we had experienced in our lifetimes before. So all of a sudden, we were in this really, really murky situation. Things were changing by the day, by the hour, by the minute. And a lot of what we had to do was kind of marry up the things we knew previously. So things we knew about payment behaviors, assumptions, thoughts, feelings. And as we got new pieces of information, we could assess and marry that information together with, okay, here's what's still holding true, but here's something that's starting to change. Or gosh, we used to have a rule, or we typically have a rule in our design system about we don't say we're sorry, we don't apologize, we don't thank people all the time. But this feels like a place where we need to break those rules because of these heightened tensions and emotions. We have people who are suddenly experiencing financial hardship and uncertainty who have never gone through that before, or they were already experiencing it and now it's been ratcheted up to a level that it's beyond their comprehension. They're living day by day and they're going also minute by minute. So we didn't necessarily set out to become the experts on the pandemic, but we had to take small bits of information as it was available to make the next best decision, to create that clarity step by step. And then as we learned new things, we pivoted, we iterated, we updated things to accommodate that new learning. This next example is going to kind of keep playing on that idea of taking small steps towards something bigger. When I was a UX manager managing a team that was working on payment plans for customers who were already in collections or their accounts had already closed and charged off. I was noticing that, okay, across our design team and our partners, so marketing, research and insights, our product managers, everybody had their own sets of research plans. And I was like, gosh, I have a feeling, and we eventually, it came to light through subsequent conversations, people were duplicating effort, they were researching the same things, or there were groups of customers where it would actually like be beneficial for us to kind of take a step back and think really holistically and less about, oh, well, this product team's working on X and this product team is working on Y. It would be beneficial to kind of join forces and work together. And so one of the things that I spearheaded in partnership with our marketing manager, who was my peer, we helped to create a shared research roadmap across all of those different silos within our organization. And that sounds really impressive, right? It was the first time we had done something like that. But here's the secret. I literally, for like the first version of this, I just copied and pasted everybody's individual research roadmap slides, and I put them into one shared document. Because the first thing we needed to do was create that clarity around, hey, we're all actually doing research that's related to each other. We have an opportunity to find places to consolidate how we're using our budget, be more efficient, all that good stuff, right? We started small. Eventually, the marketing team and design team, we started mapping our roadmaps together on the same slide. And again, it wasn't anything big or fancy. It sounds really fancy in a bullet point on a slide, but we took that small step first that would start to create that clarity and that shared understanding for all of these broader teams. And finally, we're coming back to this example of moving from writing website copy to changing the pricing and business development process when I was at a really small locally owned agency. I did not know the first thing about running a web design business. I didn't know about how to price things. I didn't know any of that. But again, as I started to grow in that role, and the more that I learned, heck, I didn't even know like HTML and CSS, let's be real. But as I started to learn more about making websites, I also learned about how you make money as a designer. I had to start with competitor research. I had to start with, reading forums and blogs and just like talking to other friends and family members who were also in design. So again, it wasn't this thing where I just magically opened up my brain and I had all of this knowledge that just poured out about websites and good content and SEO best practices and also business development best practices, right? I had to learn that. I had to break that into smaller chunks and learn it over time. And eventually it did turn into something really cool and impactful for that company. Now, before we go on to the last part about autonomy, I do want to drop some real talk, because what I don't want to reinforce is that, oh yes, all the ambiguity, we're going to navigate all of it. And I am this magical superhuman superhero that can solve all the problems, all the things. And that's not true. I am a human and all of you are too. And I just want to make space for saying that there are some types of ambiguity that it shouldn't fall to just one person. It shouldn't just fall to a content person to have to solve all these big problems. Erica Hall has had some really amazing posts lately on LinkedIn where she's been kind of dissecting, hey, are design problems, and I would kind of extend that to content problems, are those actually like symptoms of bigger like organizational design problems? There might be something about the business process or policies. There might be something else that's just off. You might be in a toxic environment where there's information and power hoarding and people aren't sharing information and resources, and they're creating swirl because they literally like won't share access to decks and it's going to require the help of your teammates, your managers, managers. I think this is just a moment to kind of acknowledge can't. Sometimes there are ambiguous situations you need to leave. Full stop. Sometimes if you don't have the privilege or the means to do that, you gotta just kind of take it day by day and give yourself a support system, give yourself outlets to help kind of protect you situations. Yeah, I don't know. I would be remiss if navigate our way through anything. I want to make space for sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. And that doesn't reflect poorly on you. All right, so all of that in mind. And again, thinking about the things we can control and we can influence, starting to work more autonomously. The way that I look at this is I have started from a place of where I get a lot of direction and supervision to starting to work with higher level guidance and then ultimately being self-directed. And so increasing autonomy might look like something like this. I'm pulling an example from when I was an instructional designer, and that was a career pivot for me. And in the beginning, I needed a lot of help. I needed a lot of feedback and revisions. And over time, as I started working on training videos and other types of content, those feedback revisions and that kind of those cycles, they started getting faster. And it, maybe I needed 4 rounds, and then it went to 2 rounds, and then it went to 1 round. And then eventually, as I learned, I shifted to being the teacher, and I heard people and direction on their work. When I was back in my agency days, I started out shadowing client consult, listened. I didn't say anything. I was busy taking notes, but I was watching other people kind of work their magic. And then eventually I started to co-host our consultations. And then from there, I started to run them solo. If you are interested in exploring people management or other forms of leadership, or you want to kind of delve into that side of things, autonomy isn't just about your own and how you're operating. It's also about setting up others to succeed. It's creating the conditions for others to work with more and more autonomy. In this example, when I was a content design manager, I was starting to observe a need for a buddy program, a kind of like a peer mentoring program. I was getting this feedback from content designers around the org, from other managers. And in conversations with some folks, particularly one of my direct reports and somebody I was mentoring at the time, they were both really interested in kind of stepping up and running with and kind of cultivating this program. And this would have been real easy. It would have been really easy for me to say, oh no, I'm going to hold on to it. I want to do it. Blah. But it was a really amazing opportunity to put them in the driver's seat and use that as an opportunity to help them, and also like be their advocate and help elevate and put the spotlight on the work that they were doing. And so ultimately what we did was I gave them some of the background context that I had already gotten. I shared some resources with them, and then I said, this is your thing. We set up some checkpoints so that they could ask questions, get feedback. I helped kind of reach out to other managers to help encourage them to let their content practitioners participate in this program from conception to launch. I was just kind of there to help kind of, it's the backseat driver almost. And so to recap all of those amazing things around ambiguity and autonomy and influence, what I want to leave you with is this. There's really a ripple effect of your contributions. And it starts out with, maybe it's one person, and then it starts to go out to multiple people. And you might start on one project or one area, and then that might shift into multiple projects or areas of subject matter expertise. And over time, you build that knowledge and confidence and skill set to do this with fewer and fewer instructions. And more often than not, you become the person to kind of see that, to make it sound like, well, yep, here's the magic formula. All right, we're all done. Everyone go off back to your day jobs, and poof, it's easy, right? Just snap your fingers and it's done. So we're going to enter into the next bit of real talk. And I want to offer up just a couple more parting thoughts on the whole thing around leveling up. And first, what I want to call out is LinkedIn and other forms of social media. They do not tell you about the role of privilege. Because of the way I look, because of who I love, because of the titles I have held, and I've had access to people and information that others haven't. I've had more power sometimes because of and this is all dependent on the workplace and the role. And so this is kind of like my second call to action to all of us is, if you find yourself, depending on your identities and where the intersectionality lies, and considering the different contexts of where and how you're showing up in different communities, in different organizations, in different contexts, I just want to encourage everyone, when you find yourself in a position where you have the privilege and you have the power, please use that to amplify and elevate others. Call out the contributions of people, invite people to the meeting, give them a direct introduction to somebody who could help them. Please use that power for good. Be a beacon for change and for hope. And on the same token, if you see or experience, or again, if you're in a position where you can call out or call in instances where people aren't living up to their values, where they aren't acting with equitable outcomes in mind, as you're safe and as you're able to, please also use your power for good in calling out and helping to kind of rally people around changing those systems or situations or meetings, whatever shape this is taking. We can't not acknowledge the role of something like privilege when also talking about our careers. There's a lot of hard work involved. There's also sometimes good luck sprinkled in there and privilege sprinkled in there too. LinkedIn also doesn't tell you about all the collaborators, the mentors, the sponsors, the allies. They don't tell you about the helpers who have been a part of your journey too. So I have talked ad nauseum about changing pricing and business development processes as a web copywriter. And this is a screenshot of my LinkedIn and my resume. And I have summed up that story in this one amazing, concise bullet point, right? I implemented a content-first web design process and improved client communication, team efficiency, and the quality of deliverables. That is so damn punchy, isn't it? Like that sounds really, really cool and impressive. But it doesn't tell the whole story. If I tried to tell the whole story, that would probably turn that into a really, really long bullet point, and that breaks like every rule around concision and brevity, right? But to do that, to implement that kind of change, I had to partner with my the two other web designers who were on the team. We also had a graphic design, and we also looped in our together as that unit to make. Growing in your career, it also comes with a pretty healthy dose of fail as well. We all face setbacks and pivots and twists and turns as these stories unfold. And I spent the whole part of this beginning of this presentation telling you all, I did this thing, I changed it. Whoa. Spoiler alert, our boss told us no. The first time we sat down with him and presented, we had our, we all this well thought out rationale. We had this beautiful deck. We walked him through all of that, and he still told us no. He was really, really worried about the risk of losing our existing client roster and potentially like being too priced too high for them. And then because we were mainly working with small to mid-sized companies, he was also concerned that such a high price could potentially be a point of contention with new clients as well. And ultimately, it was our boss's business coach. So thank you, Bob. He's the one who made the case in the end on our behalf, and he's the one that got our owner to eventually agree to a pilot, and then we eventually rolled out an updated pricing, full stop. Leveling up also takes time. It's really easy in the course of a presentation like this to be like, oh yeah, like she just has all these neat, tidy slides. That took these lessons. This is the culmination of 15 years plus of learning and trying stuff and not getting it right, and then getting some stuff right, and changing over time. And so I really just want to impress upon everyone that this is one version of a multitude of timelines and storylines, and what my path and what my story looks like, it's going to be different from what Suzanne's looks like. Where Paula is in her journey, it's going to look different from where Ariel might be in hers. And so I also want to just kind of reiterate that we're all kind of on our own timelines and progressions of things, and you're doing things in the steps and in the order and in the time that makes sense most for you. So invitation to like give yourself that grace and remember that these things take time. All right, so, we've had a lot of real talk. We've talked about some really, really tactical stuff. Now you're going to go back to work. Maybe you're heading into performance management, reflecting about goals, thinking about next year. And you're like, okay, well, where are these magical opportunities for me? Where can I find inspiration to apply this in my day job? And I leave you with kind of these 4 pointers around where and how you can kind of suss out those opportunities to practice and grow your influence, how you're navigating ambiguity and working with more autonomy. So first, solving shared pain points. Is there something that you're feeling? Have you talked to other content folks and like, oh gosh, yeah, we're feeling this too. We could really use a template around project intake, or it'd be really helpful if we had this one pager that helped explain to people how to like roughly scope of a content strategy or content design engagement. Like kind of chances are, if there's a question you're asking yourself, there's probably a lot of other people who share that question, and there could be something you could make that could help a lot of people. On the flip side, if you have your version of a big ass spreadsheet, if you have something that's been a win, where and how can you amplify that and put that out there for more people to use and adapt and bring into their work? Your manager, your manager's manager, if it's design leads you're working with, part of their job is to help you understand what are the opportunities? What's a really important thing to our business right now? What are we noticing again and again about our internal processes? If they know somebody who's working in a similar interest area as you, like being connected to the people and the opportunities that can kind of skills and new tactics, ask. And if they can't, or they won't, or they don't know, reach out to groups like Content Strategy Seattle. They mentioned their Slack. And we all want you to succeed. And finally, lean into the kinds of things you're excited about. I mentioned AI earlier, and I mean, this is going to be recorded, so like, try not to let this out too much further, but like AI is not, it's not the thing I'm like all up in. It just isn't. That's not where my energy is. My energy is more in accessibility, inclusive design, product equity, things like that. I also like really want to learn more about like trust and safety. Really fantastic and a subject matter expertise in like speaking about death and other sensitive subject matter. So with that, just know that you don't have to be an expert in everything. There's just so many different facets of content and design. Please just kind of, like channel your energy and your attention into those things that really, really jazz you up and get you excited, because those are the kinds of things that like that passion and energy and enthusiasm, it'll show. It'll come through. Related to that point, your time and your energy are finite. Again, we are not superhumans. We are not superheroes. We are organizations we're part of, kids, partners, you name it. We have other things that need our time and attention and focus. And so protect your time. There is only one of you. I really love this gift from The Good Place. That's Eleanor. She's one of the main characters. She loves shrimp. So find your shrimp and unapologetically embrace that and bring that spirit with you. also, as you're doing things, you're trying things, you're learning things, your work and your results, they don't have to be the biggest or the loudest thing out there to matter. It's small wins for the win, right? A lot of these stories and anecdotes I'm sharing, these are things that up until now, and a couple other like versions of this presentation, like nobody knows the small company that I worked at where I changed the pricing and the business development process. Like that did not make the cover of like Wall Street Journal or anything like that. And so, you know, I recognize a little bit the irony of like, well, Shannon, you have a fancy title and you work at like a well-known company now. Suspending that just for a moment. Even now in my job, there are things that I'm doing that it's not this big, shiny headline grabbing thing. Like some of the most impactful stuff I've done is like, I wrote a really clear wiki page. I did some internal documentation, but it's making a difference for the people that it needs to make a difference for. And so I want everyone to remember and to say, I'm going to leave us with this affirmation from Jane Ruffino. She's a very, very dear friend, and she's also this amazing, amazing human being and a real kick-ass content designer and UX writer and strategist. And Jane shared at a meetup earlier this year, you don't have to change all the minds, and you don't have to change them all overnight. And with that, I just want to say thank you again for all of you who joined us tonight. Thank you for your time and your attention and your energy, because again, all of that is finite. So it is not lost on me that you're spending an hour and a half of your day with little old me. So thank you. I very, very much appreciate it. And I hope we can keep in touch. And now I'm gonna like stare awkwardly off to the side because now I'm navigating my other computer screen. I will
Well,
also,
while you do that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, I'll post a link in the chat to my slides. And then that also has my contact information in there as well. So that I don't keep like just showing you guys like the back of my head. Trying not to be too awkward, even though I do really like to be awkward sometimes.
We'll also post this link in our various channels too. So if you don't catch it right now, or if you want to share it with others, definitely want to make sure that everyone gets the chance to